I'm Dr. Greg Eckel, and this is Win the Day with James Whittaker.
You're listening to Win the Day with James Whittaker.
What we doing live echoes in eternity.
Broadcasting from Los Angeles, California. Here's your host, James Whittaker.
Let's go.
Hey winners, welcome back to Win the Day. If this is your first time here, we sit down with some of the world's true change makers to give you all the tips, tools, and strategies to win the day every day. The quote for this episode comes from Hippocrates and says, "The natural force within each of us is the greatest healer of all." Our guest today is Dr. Greg Eckel, whose journey into naturopathic and Chinese medicine began when he noticed the overmedication of children while teaching preschool. Today, he is the founder of Energy for Life, a wellness and recharging center in Park City, Utah. His unique combination of naturopathic and Chinese medicine provides an array of tools to treat acute and chronic illness, emphasizing prevention and wellness principles. Dr. Eckel's personal experience with his wife's Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease led him on a deep dive into regenerative medicine. In his centers, he uses an array of techniques and technologies to correct the body's control systems and protect the body's energy. He believes the future of medicine lies in frequency, and he's leading the way in bringing bioenergetics mainstream. Dr. Eckel has been featured on major networks like ABC, NBC, and Fox, and has reached over 150,000 people with his online brain regeneration and bioenergetics summits. In this episode, we're going to go through a lot. We're going to get into some good stuff. We're going to talk about the defining moment that changed Dr. Eckel's life forever, what drives degeneration in the body and his holistic approach to healing, why the medical system can be the very thing keeping us sick, and how to upgrade your daily routine for more energy, longevity, and happiness. Before we begin, the right bit of inspiration can completely change the trajectory of someone's life. So if there's a friend or a loved one out there who needs to hear this episode or could use some help to win the day, share it with them right now. All right, let's win the day with Dr. Greg Eckel. Greg, great to see you, my friend. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you so much, James.
Well, I know that was a bit of a fancy intro. Do you want to tell us in sort of layman's terms about what it is with the work that you do today? And then we'll dive into your backstory.
Yes, the layman's terms of what we do, we have deep presence with our patients. We listen to what's going on with them, and we go in at whatever level resonates with them to create transformation.
Sounds pretty difficult to argue with, right? It seems like a pretty common sense approach to medicine.
Precision medicine, N of one. What works for you may not work for somebody else.
What do you see when you look at the medical system today? How healthy is our health system?
We have a disease care, sick model care. We will manage your disease to the grave. We're not really interested in bringing you back to vitality.
Are there any countries around the world that you feel like are getting it right?
You know, it's a pretty sad state of affairs across the board, unfortunately, James. You know, there's studies of blue zones of where the centurions live, right? Dan Buettner drew some circles around where there's the highest concentration of people living past 100 years old. He has some 7 pillars of what goes into those communities, and healthcare is not one of them.
For sure. Tell us about the over-medication of children and when that came on your radar for the first time.
You know, it was in Portland, Oregon. I was a Montessori earth school teacher, and I was hanging out with the 3 to 6 year olds, and it was the early 90s. And my favorite child, Michael, I like to say he included others in his learning. He was a rambunctious dude. He was all over. He included others in his learning. And the lead teacher, Mary Kay, advocated, hey, parents, you got to take your boy into the pediatrician. Think there's something up. And I remember the first day Michael came back into the classroom. He was slumped in his chair. His shoe was untied. And you know that sparkle in the eye of children? It was just gone. And it broke my heart. I thought there has got to be a better way to treat these kids rather than drugging them. You know, you fast forward to today, half the kids in the elite schools are on some type of attentional deficit disorder medication. And it's almost like you have to be on them to keep up with the grind. But that was the beginning of Dr. Greg's path to a natural path into naturopathic and Chinese medicine.
Yeah, what is it about that you noticed in Chinese medicine that you weren't finding in the traditional medicine that we have in America and Australia?
You know, at that same time, I was 20-something and I was a vegetarian, and I thought I was eating healthy. You know, I had beer French fries and frozen burritos. I was like, yeah, I'm a vegetarian. This is health food, right? I had really no energy. And I went at that time, all roads led me into the naturopathic school and Chinese medicine school, and they addressed my diet. And I felt better. And I thought, wow, I didn't have to take a drug. I like the bioenergetics or the energetics of talking about meridians and acupuncture points and botanical medicine. That I found super fascinating as a 20-something. And it actually moved the lever for me. And like my vitality and my energy came back. I thought, if I'm going back to school, I want to be in service to people. And this seems like a very valid and valor-filled path. And it has been for the last 24 years.
Wow. Do you feel like most people are so disconnected to just how great they can feel?
Definitely. We're running in a fear-based model of survival, right? The propaganda boxes I teach my children about the television is really there to sell more soap, right? That was the early advertisers, but now they have dialed that into a fevered pitch where when you are in fear, you're in your limbic system, right? That is your fight or flight stress response. You're actually not able to access your frontal lobe, which is the true greatness of the human body, of the human. And we haven't been taught how powerful we truly are. And what I'm seeing now in our centers is by educating people about that, stopping the fear-based response, you can actualize your greatness really quickly. And actually some really amazing things happen that I will share later.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
The idea of corporatization, like you sort of have to be here and experience it firsthand in terms of just every element of American society. Like, I don't think Australia is bad, but it seems like it's with everything over here, even things like the direct-to-consumer pharmaceutical advertising. It's only available in America and New Zealand. And we had Dr. Dave Rabin came on the podcast as well, and he spoke about why you advertising to people who don't even know what this stuff is or what it's used for. How do you feel about some of those things?
What
I mean by that is it creates problems when you follow the money or when money's such a big part of all that.
Well, what's interesting, I just was having a conversation with a woman that ran the advertising for Fox nationally. And the amount of pharmaceutical money, when you look at the ads and the advertisers, who's running the show, there's no way that the industry will put anything else that would go against their bottom line. So we don't realize how much we're cooked. Like the system is now kind of baked against us because you can't put a contrary message out on you're like biting the hand that feeds you. Like when you look at the amount, it is follow the money. And unfortunately, it's our agencies are now captured as well. And so when you look at the level of censorship, the way that dissident voices are shunned or deplatformed, I mean, we're in deep. We're in deep, James.
For sure. Misaligned incentives as well. Yeah, when you got censorship and misaligned incentives where it's the corporate greed at the expense of individual health, that's when I start to get a real problem with that. Like censoring people for having a difference of opinion. I mean, isn't it nice to know what someone else is thinking? So then there is an opportunity to provide either a different perspective or give them perhaps an education or an insight that they may not have. I feel like we can learn from everyone.
That has been so twisted. That curiosity, that's one of the biggest take homes that I think I can stress to your listeners and viewers is maybe let's just be curious. Can we bring that back into our daily lives and explore? Because what has happened, those voices have been silenced in that they're dangerous if you listen to that. And one of the things that I took to heart really over the last 3 to 4 years is, well, maybe I should get curious. And I realized some of my biases that I bought it. I had bought a lot of biases through time around a lot of different topics where I started to look like, okay, well, if it's happening here, maybe I should look over here. And so what I'm finding actually clinically, I mean, we have people fly in from around the globe to our center in Park City, Utah for this type of care because it's not happening anywhere else. And we're really curious. We're curious practitioners, and we listen deeply, and we tailor treatments directly to the people that come into us.
Hey, it sounds like a good plan. You had a moment in your life, well, not a moment. I know I think it was an 18-month journey with your wife, Sarai, with everything else. Can you take us into that journey and how that just helped shift your perspective and the treatment of health and medicine and well-being?
Sure. About 18 years ago, I met this woman, Soraya, and 6'1" goddess. I didn't actually know a being like this could be on the planet. I thought perhaps like maybe the aliens put her here just to mess around with me, because I was, I was in my 40s, and I didn't really know love could exist like that in this 3D space we find ourselves. I mean, amazing. So much so that we blended our families. She had 3 kids. I had 2. We even had a maid named Alice, like the Brady Bunch. And we blended our medical practices. She was certified nurse midwife, nurse practitioner, amazing. Like, women would come out of the gynecology room, like whistling a little tune, doing a little dance. Like, what in the world are you all doing in there? So she, just a different type of being on the planet. And we bought our first house together. And, as you move, things get lost in the shuffle, or maybe this box got left behind. There was one Fiesta orange plate. All of the kids had a certain color, and this was just kind of our extra plate for guests and whatnot, but it was missing. And it became like this eerie Groundhog Day. At first, you could roll with it. You just moved. Sarai's looking for the plate. She'd go into the cupboard, she'd go down the hallway, she'd go in the garage, and then finally wind up in the attic. But it became like repetitive to the point of multiple times a day. It became fodder for the kids and I around the dinner table. And then one day, my office manager at the center, Chelsea, came up to me and said, "Hey, Doc, Sarai just left the building." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" Yep, she just, with her stethoscope and white jacket, strolled out through the lobby, said bye to her patients, and went right out the front door. And I thought, I had to grow up very quick then. We put a halt to the practice, pushed everybody out 3 months, and really went looking for a solution as to what was going on with her. And unfortunately, I exhausted all of the naturopathic Chinese medicine resources, and I got back into the medical system. And going through it with your loved one's life on the line, I knew it was fractured, being in practice and seeing patients in my clinic. But to go through it with your loved one, your wife, who is literally, in 3 months, she couldn't feed herself, she couldn't speak. It was rapidly progressing dementia. It was heartbreaking. As a physician, and even advocating for ourselves, it was super, super difficult. So my heart really goes out to really anyone with their loved one's life on the line or in chronic illness, because it is so fractionated and broken.
And how old was she at the time?
She was 42.
Yeah.
And so, those kind of common things that you would think at 42 would be, well, maybe it's menopausal or hormone issue or mold or Lyme, these kind of smoking guns that I, deal with all of the time. I like to say you do not want to be the interesting patient in my practice, because I do see the people that have been to Mayo and Cleveland and the world experts, and then they wind up with Dr. Gehrig at Energy for Life centers now. So we navigated this with Soraya. We brought in hospice because it was just overwhelming with the kids and the practice. And I became, really, I was positioned well as loving husband and innovator, out of the box thinker. So I went looking for solutions, and the differential was ominous. Autoimmune diseases of the brain, or Creutzfeldt-Jakob, like you mentioned, which is mad cow syndrome in people. This is a rare and as of yet uncurable disease process. In looking for those solutions, I found a lot of solutions, but unfortunately, none of them helped Soraya. It was a 18-month journey that I do not wish on anyone. At the end of that ride, they give you, in the Creutzfeldt-Jakob world, a free brain biopsy for your loved one to determine, was it Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease? And It was CJD. That navigating grief, the loss, I always knew she was 1 in a million. Unfortunately, the medical community agreed that she was truly 1 in a million. I know, in such an odd way, James, it ripped me open as a human and reinstated my faith in unity consciousness. I just thought, this is tragic. I had 8 years with this woman. To have it end in that way, I thought we must have written this before we got here to wake up, because it's just tragic. Like, you never realize that you could know someone that deeply, and then to have them leave early, it's something.
To only get the diagnosis after as well.
After, yeah. So, you're navigating that, looking for solutions. I'm talking to world experts because it was very niched. I find Case Western in Ohio has the Prionic Surveillance Center of North America. Before this, I didn't really know what prions were. And I think a lot of your listeners and viewers have never heard the term. It was found in 1987. Stanley Prusiner, UCSF, got a Nobel Prize for its discovery. In the first textbook of prionic diseases, you have prions, or misfolded proteins. There's alpha-synuclein of Parkinson's. There's beta-amyloid plaque of Alzheimer's and dementia. So what I assembled along the way is all kinds of therapeutics. I invented a nasal spray. We have certain herbal concoctions. We have stem cell therapies to help reconstitute the proteins and reverse neurodegenerative diseases. I know, coming through this as a heart-centered being, I came out whole. I definitely navigated the stages of loss and grief. And, even there, you see it's there, right? That loss doesn't go away for anyone. But we navigated that and came out whole and on fire, really, to help as many people as we can and really get this message out, because it's not coming from the top down. This is it's a groundswell of opportunity, possibility, and really that's my main takeaway for everybody is you don't have to go this away alone, and really asking the right questions and finding the guides along the way. We go arm in arm with our patients and our clients because we have a lot of coaching available for folks too. But that process, coming from that, it ripped me open and put me in a different state of being as far as ability to address the heart of the matter, going to talk about the tough stuff, because you don't know how long you have. Just reminder, look your loved ones in the eyes, hug them, and tell them you love them, because you don't know how long you've got with them. There's no guarantee. And so it's given me this deep appreciation for life, the human experience. These bodies we walk around in are miraculous. And just being here now, like it's been a gift, James. I could have easily had my head pushed underwater, turned to numbing out, drugs, depression. And I went through my stuff. But coming through and navigating that has really lit me on fire. And, we are inspiring others to get into action, to help heal themselves, heal their families, heal their communities, get into their heart and their brain alignment and coherence, and create from that heart-centered space the more beautiful world our hearts know and desire. Because again, it can happen so quickly here if we get enough people tuned into what they're actually capable of doing.
And taking ownership of their own health journey. And I can't imagine how difficult, or how much more difficult it would have been to watch someone who was such an amazing light for the world, to watch that light go. It would have been just the ultimate race against the clock, but you being a doctor, a health expert, feeling so helpless.
It's the worst. You feel like you failed. Like, well, what kind of healer are you? What kind of physician? Like, this is your life's calling and passion, and you can't fix her. And there's a lot of letting go in that process. You realize we're not truly under control here. I actually, I have a shirt that says, relax, nothing is under control, right? And it's just the remembering of, I don't know what somebody's path is or what purpose is behind it. And healing happens in multiple different ways. And the take-home message for me, and I could be totally just putting a story on top of tragedy, but you know what? It is a good story, and I don't care if I've made it up because I now am playing at such a higher level, impacting so many people's lives with the work that we're doing and the research and education, is you have to let it go. Like, I am not God. I can't determine if somebody's going to live or die. I can do my best, as my mother always taught me. And that's what I invite our patients to do, is really the answer lies within. It is in here is what matters in the heart space. It's not the next shiny thing. It's not the stem cell therapies that we do. It's not the hyperbarics. It's not the ancient lens of Chinese medicine. It's really bringing wholeness back to people, having them heard, seen, loved, and know that they're whole. Like, even with pathology, significant pathology, we treat a lot of folks with neurodegeneration, Alzheimer's, dementia, Parkinson's, multiple sclerosis, head traumas. But getting to the heart of the matter is the path. And I don't know what that outcome will be. Nobody can. I mean, I like to say I have a crystal ball, but it's not that good. Nobody can predict the future. But we can see if we can get more and more people on that path and reflecting back their wins so that other people can see the possibility and the potential that possibly that could happen for me, and them really getting energized with that. We are getting some phenomenal results that we're publishing in the literature so that other people can see those results so we can exponentially create the change that we want to see in the world. And that part, that's what gets me up in the morning. I count my blessings that I knew love that deeply. And now I know that it can exist here, and I'm able to perpetuate and propagate that level of love. So that was a blessing. I have such deep, profound gratitude to know that firsthand. I mean, what a gift. And to know the preciousness of life, and don't take it for granted. There are so many things that people kind of put their head in the sand. And I hope we can get into that in this interview around, I see a lot of people that don't want to know, like, I don't want to know if I have dementia or Alzheimer's. And it's like, no, actually you do, because we have patients that we've reversed that with. Parkinson's, we have 3 cases coming out this year, we're going to publish these 3 cases. They no longer have evidence of disease. Their providers, when they go back to their neurologists, the cognitive bias of the system is, no, it's agreed upon. If you get a Parkinson's diagnosis, you're either going to proceed quickly or slowly into that degeneration. There's no hope for you getting better. They've never seen it. We are now seeing patients 50, 60, 70, 80% better. 100%, 3 patients now, 100% better. We're publishing that because their doctor says, Holly, actually from Austin, Texas, she went back to her neurologist. The neurologist apologized to her for misdiagnosing her 9 years prior with this condition, because she said, well, I must have misdiagnosed you because you can't get better from Parkinson's. I'm like, no. The medical records were clear, and my analysis, you did have Parkinson's, but you no longer have it. Now, can I guarantee that for people? No, I cannot guarantee that, but we are seeing it. And then those people get together in our community and feed it back to other people to provide the inspiration and hope that, no, this is actually real. It's like Bannister's 4-minute mile. It was never dreamed possible the human body could run a 4-minute mile. I mean, that was the medical consensus. at the time. Now kids are doing it on FaceTime chewing bubble gum, it's such commonality for it at this point. And that's what we want to do with these neurodegenerative states and also on a longevity play.
Yeah, I know you're big on the research. I'd love for you to take us into perhaps some of the things that you do in terms of perhaps how you go about helping someone who might have multiple sclerosis or Alzheimer's or Parkinson's or anything like that, and how important it is that the patient believes that their healing is possible along the way.
It is very important. The mindset, I have 5 M's of brain regeneration, and mindset is number 1. If you don't have in your heart, mind, and soul the possibility of you getting better, you will not get better. Now, we work with skeptics all the time, James, and they do improve as well. And there has been some research on that. And I'll give you for instance on that particular mindset component. They took 3 sets of people with back pain that were surgical candidates, right? They had similar MRIs, similar backgrounds. They broke them up into 3 cohorts. 1 went to the surgeon, 1 went to physical therapy, and 1 went to chiropractic. So those were the 3 groups of people. Now, of the 3 cohorts, the people that went to the 3 different groups had the belief that therapy was going to benefit them. Their MRIs, their symptomatology was all the same. So they took out all of the variables, as many as they could in a live study. And guess what the result was? All 3 groups improved to the point that they no longer had back pain. Those that did surgery got benefit. Those that went chiropractic route got benefit. Those who went physical therapy got benefit. And so the key takeaway was that the mindset of the individual enlisting the therapy had belief that it was going to work for them. So we've taken that, and there's been multiple other scenarios of studies around mindset. They did a sham, so on a knee surgery, they took 2 parts, and I'm not sure how they pulled this one off, because the one subset got the surgery for the knee. The other one got a scar. They opened them up but didn't do anything and then sewed them back up. And both cohorts improved. They no longer had knee pain, statistically significant. So it wasn't 100%, but it was enough in both groups of people. So we've enlisted that. It's not just mindset. There obviously has to be some intervention, and we stack all of those. We call it the biohack is in the stack. We have a very sophisticated brain regeneration program. But that aspect, I've had 70-year-olds come into my procedure rooms, and we talk about intentions of what we want these cells to do. And I've had people make it that far and in their 70s saying, I don't feel worthy of healing. And that is such a tragedy that there's no discussion in medicine around intentions, around awareness of enlisting this thing and this thing in us in the healing possibility. Now some say, oh, it's placebo. But you know what? Placebo beats all modern medicine. It's 30% greater effectiveness. Why are we not enlisting that, at least as a therapeutic intervention? In the pure scientific model, oh, we want to discount it. It's like, wait a minute. No, it beats all drug therapy. Why wouldn't we enlist that?
It's so true. How empowered someone is to take responsibility of their own health journey. A lot of people are looking for a pill or to see a specialist. It's almost like we want to cast the blame onto someone else, to the obligation or the responsibility of someone else to make us healthy and well.
It's outsourcing your greatness. It's you being a victim in your own life. Like, you're creating the reality. I want people to really wake up, and I think it's perfect for Win the Day. And, as I went through your episodes before coming on, it's like, this is, I think, going to resonate really beautifully. And I love the Hippocratic quote that you gave. It really is about informing your greatness and taking your power back. You have way more power here than you realize, but you have to bring it back. The answer lies within is like that Cat Stevens tune, right? It is tuning inside and listening to your intelligence. I like to say I do a lot of nothing all day. It is your innate intelligence and the information coming in that does the healing. We can create a great vessel and container and possibility. We leave the door open for that. Every year I get emboldened by how I can speak into it because I have more evidence. I've seen it happen. I'm not just making it up on the research. I used to employ 7 doctors for a decade. They'd run out to the research conferences and bring it back and look at this great research. And we'd run it on 50 to 100 patients and nothing would happen. And it'd be like, well, that's some great research, but in the real world, is that really working? So, there is a reality that we definitely want to move the needle. I'm not saying 100% cure by any means, but I'm saying why not leave the door open for that to happen? I like to say I've seen a lot of spontaneous remissions through time. That's what Western medicine calls it. I found that as a second-year medical student, there was a book of 562 spontaneous remissions. And these are of conditions that were uncurable, but these patients no longer had evidence of disease. So that is a thing. And so we like to welcome a lot of those into our practice.
We'll be back with the show shortly. I've got a quick question for you. Are you living up to your potential? It's a question that shapes your family, your business, and your overall happiness every single day. That's why I'm excited to introduce the Win the Day quiz. Head over to winthedayquiz.com right now, answer a few thought-provoking questions, and you'll instantly discover how well you're performing relative to your true potential. And here's the exciting part for our Win the Day family. As a fan of the show, you'll receive a personalized and absolutely free action plan to help you win the day every day. Now, just imagine how transformational the results will be when you consistently show up as the best version of yourself in every aspect of your life. Don't miss out. Take the Win the Day quiz now by visiting winthedayquiz.com or click the link in the show notes. All right, let's get back to the show. It's interesting when you look back at the quotes from like Marcus Aurelius and quotes from thousands of years ago. They often talk about this idea of mind-body unity and the quality of your life depends on the quality of your thoughts and all those types of things. It's like now we're talking to people like you and Dr. Ellen Langer, the Harvard psychologist, and Dr. Dave Rabin, that it's now recognized. It's like we got lost somewhere along the way and we're just going back to some of this ancient wisdom that you spoke about before.
Yeah, that aspect, what's interesting as a Chinese medicine practitioner, you learn in the schooling that there is no word for mind-body medicine. It is all heart-centered medicine. The emperor or empress, it's all heart-centered. And so they don't even have a word for mind-body. Now, we in the West, we think, we can navigate out into the gray matter regions of our brain. We're not connected to our body nor the environment and think we're going to do well with that. Like we look at mental health issues and that disconnect from self, that we don't want to have anybody interfering with that. Like that deep connection into the heart and having that experience with yourself. So many of us are trying to, we will eat, we'll take, medications, we'll take, alcohol, substances to change, plant medicines to change your reality, to have an experience. But ultimately, that answer is within there. And you need folks and advisors to hold that space and remind you, no, it's not over there. It is in there. It's in here that matters. Like I have a definition of dis-ease. It's separation from source. So the ability to move into and out of dis-ease with ease is true health. That is vitality. That's vibrancy. That's thriving. And that's where we're going. We're at the precipice of creating, I really want to create this Buckminster Fuller event, which is you create the new thing where then the old one becomes irrelevant. I'm not interested in justifying or proving to the system, which is a disease care based model of care. They don't learn what health is. It's the absence of disease that they're worried about or treating symptoms. The symptoms are just leaves on the tree. you've got to trace that down to the trunk and then down to the root and address root cause imbalances. So the intelligence will throw more and more symptoms up for somebody to get them to pay attention, or they won't.
Do you think people can ever be trusted to make the right decisions, or will they always need a third-party expert like a doctor to be able to help guide them to that, especially when you walk into the supermarket and you just get bombarded by, preferred space for Coca-Cola products and all that and junk food?
Oh, yeah.
And
You look
else.
at what's at that last little bit before the registers, like, the Reese's or the chocolate and peanut butter. Like, let's get that quick fix of the dopamine hit.
For sure. Like, how are humans supposed to respond when the best psychologists in the world are working for social media companies to make things more addictive, working for advertisers to target children and put things on unhealthy cereal boxes to entice 4-year-olds to scream at their parents until how is the individual consumer supposed to do that while at the same time you don't really want to regulate so much in terms of necessarily banning products in a free country that people could access?
Yeah, I think we do need to trust people. Right. And I think we need to educate. There is the root word of doctor is docere, which is teacher, and giving informed consent. So knowing what your possibilities are. Right. So we started the show out talking about, there is a lot of propaganda out there. There is censorship. We need to acknowledge that. And so for people to realize that there is, the social dilemma, which is there's the 100,000 programmers behind there that is really energized with a lot of capital and money to get you to do something. You think you can beat that? There's no way. So that's the piece for me is, okay, we actually do need to be here now. We need to be in here. And that means getting into meditation, getting into nature, taking breaks from the frickin' device. It's a powerful thing. I mean, I'm not saying become a Luddite. We can utilize this, but we do need to put some controls on ourselves to think we can beat it, or I'm smart enough that they're not going to manipulate me. You're fooling yourself, right? I mean, there is some sophisticated neuroscience going on there that, you can run programs in the human body. So you've got to take it upon yourself to program you and your family, and then surround yourself with like-minded individuals. And I'll give you for instance, one of the things that I've recently come across that I want to share is I'm in some longevity groups because that's a very big passion of mine. And not just live forever just for the sake of living forever, or like uploading consciousness into the cloud. I'm not interested in that. But this component of the preciousness of life and the experience, the receptor that we have here in our bodies. There's a mindset of, I'm not going to hang out with people who don't think they're going to live past 100 years old. And that skews the caliber of individual that you are now surrounding yourself with. Because when you do that, you realize, and I've had the privilege of sitting with 90-year-olds, James, and they tell me, Doc, if I was going to live this long, I would have taken better care of myself, right? So when I say I want to be, 156 years old, you say that to a group of people and you can hear a pin drop. They look at you like, that doctor is nuts. Have you seen them out there? They are decrepit, they're diseased, they're suffering. That's not the aging. That's not normal aging. The normal aging is you go to the end and then you drop, right? You've got great community, amazing experience. You've got the richness, the love. You feel embraced and heard and seen. You've got vibrancy. You've got muscles. You've got sovereign free mobility, right? That's the type of aging. So when you start surrounding yourself, it's like, oh, wait a minute. These behaviors are not great for me to make it past 100. These are very easy. So it's not a sacrifice. It's an enjoyment. It's a vibrancy, You
live in the world of possibility.
Yes.
I've been thinking about that a lot today. The
Yes.
friends that you and I have and the sort of environments we're in, it's a world of what's possible.
It really is.
A quote where you said, aging is a state of mind. And
Yes.
You sort of touched on it there. Is there anything you want to add that we haven't covered yet in terms of that idea of aging as a state of mind?
Yeah, that component and this is what I get from Dan Sullivan, who has been really instrumental in teaching so many entrepreneurs, but you have to make your future greater than your past. And we can actually produce quite a bit, that wisdom that comes with age, your times around the sun, your chronologic order, which is how many times around the sun you went, that's how old you are. But your cells have a completely different story. They are in the eternal present now, which is timeless. That's a timeless body. There is no time in now, in the present moment. So by tuning into that, my cells say that they're 17 years younger than how old I am now. I feel like an 18-year-old most days, and it is possible. It is a state of mind. So yes, if you start surrounding your people, like retirement, I think you should get rid of that concept that was made up. And the stats on retirement are horrendous. About 2 to 3 years after retirement, majority of people die. And why is that? Well, there's no purpose for the human to be here anymore. So the universe recalls the pieces and parts. And so there is that aspect, like we need purpose, we need community. So aging is a state of mind. If you wake up thinking you're old and decrepit, that's the story, your cells. You're telling a story to your cells. And guess what? They listen. They're going to respond. It is an amazing apparatus if we tune into actually how consciousness works and what is going on in reality. You can actually train yourself younger and younger. I keep getting younger as every decade going on. And, taking the wisdom of the life and the experiences, sharing that openly with others, and just opening up to it I love it. I mean, I'm exhilarated. I get up with purpose and passion. I'm really jazzed, if you can see that. And it's contagious. Like that's what I want to be spreading around.
Do you have a health affirmation or something that you inject into your daily routine to promote that sort of energy and wellness? I mean, there have been times for me that I've actually mentioned on the podcast before where I've had things like debilitating back pain for years. And then I would go through a health affirmation and it would disappear. And I know that sounds crazy, but that was the reality. And the times that I feel these different things, it's usually because I'm in a week of very big stress. And that's just my body is responding to that stress and all of those things that I've got. But if I can breathe in gratitude and health and function into those areas of pain through some very good breathing exercises as well, it almost completely alleviates it almost instantly. And that is a amazingly positive discovery. And for people who criticize and doubt that, do it yourself. Try it. Really believe it. And then you can come back and talk.
Yeah, run the experiment. Get curious about it. Don't just discount it because, if you haven't given it a trial, you don't know. A couple things there. So you asked, what do I inject in? And so I start my day out with meditation, whether it be 30 minutes or an hour long. I remember a quote of, I believe it was Gandhi, who was one of my heroes. And if he had a very strenuous day, he would say, instead of my 1 hour of meditation, I must do 2. Right. And with a massive agenda for the day. But starting from that connection to yourself, your heart, your higher self, not the ego mind or the simpleton or the desires or the wants and needs. It's really, getting still and quiet with yourself and knowing you, like what is motivating, what does light up the heart, your emperor or empress with joy. That is crucial. When I don't get that in the morning, it's just like, the winds of change are blowing out there. And I don't know if you've been out there lately, James, but it can get pretty scary. Yeah. So it is that component, movement. I love winning the day with, getting on the Peloton bike, or I set my schedule up to have 2 hours of ski time in the winter or biking up in the mountains in Utah. Because it is so vital to bring that. I need to bring that energy because if I'm not at my game, I have a lot of people depending on me and my team and my providers that we're training in this methodology. I mean, it's their life on the line, and we take that very seriously. So I've got to be the picture of thriving, and I like that pressure quote unquote pressure, because it is very motivating, because it's not about me. It's about us, right? We're pretending to be separate in this reality, right? You're over there, I'm here, you all are in there. But ultimately we all came from nothing and we return to nothing. And we have this short, brief time together. And I think we're really here to wake each other up. So, that is what I instill in on a day-to-day basis. And, if I'm making that up, well, so be it. And I don't mind.
Yeah. Well said. Well said. So a few years ago, something crazy happened. COVID hit all of a sudden. So we're in Los Angeles, where I live and where we are today. They do things like they filled in skate bowls with sand. They closed the gyms. They took down the basketball hoops, and then they introduced things like vaccine mandates and all of that type of thing. How do you feel about how effective society handled COVID, which, obviously it was a crazy time with everything going on for the world?
At the beginning of that, it was super scary, right? This big unknown wave traveling around the globe, and nobody knew.
Footage coming out of Italy and all of those.
Yeah. And it was really interesting just with the connectivity. I actually had physician friends in Northern Italy. I had my herbal teachers in Chengdu, University of Chengdu, in the hospitals in their hazmat suits, that we were able to communicate on different platforms. First time ever coordinated effort of, hey, these herbs are working in China, utilize them in your practice in America. It was really fascinating that way. But I knew there was trouble within the first week of it coming into the United States. A friend of mine, in his newsletter, not advertising any products or anything, was educating his patient base on how to handle viral illness, because it was a virus and we'd never seen this one. A lot of research behind different herbal remedies and different, he had about 20 years of experience. He had the FTC and the Department of Justice turn off his credit card processing machines in his practice because he was peddling COVID remedies or, racketeering on a pandemic. And, he got it resolved with many, many thousands of dollars of lawyers' bills. But I was like, how did they get that so quick? Where did that come from? Why was there so much censorship? I published on YouTube, on our YouTube channel, an informed consent video of what was in the vaccine. And I had the immunologist of the naturopathic school in Portland say, hey, Dr. Gehrig, watch that. That's a slippery slope. And I thought, informed consent has now become a slippery slope. Like, that is the basic tenet of medicine. People should know what is being put into their body. Coercion for, giving donuts or free coffee or pizzas or any of those things, of reimbursing people for getting a medication, is not ethical. We have had a massive, I think, crime against humanity perpetuated. And we're seeing the evidence in my clinic now, in that I'm seeing acceleration of cancers, acceleration of neurodegeneration, with the further, as people get more and more boosters of these experimental medications. I don't even think they've changed the definition of vaccine, James, in Webster's, in all of the dictionaries, actually. I think you have to use the Wayback Machine on the internet to get back to what an original definition of a vaccine is. So I think we're enamored by the new technology. It does hold some great progress, but I'm seeing a lot of complications. I'm seeing conditions that I have not seen before. I'm seeing a lot of teenage girls having issues with their menses, polycystic ovary system. We're seeing fertility rates go up now. It's a little bit alarming to say we're not actually sure where that's coming from, and we can't even talk about it. You get censored. Their medical boards really clamp down on doctors and physicians that are speaking about it. And like I mentioned, that cognitive bias of the reality of, well, vaccines are safe. I don't understand how we can say safe and effective when there's been no long-term study on this medication. I think the agencies are captured. They've lost a lot of stature and status in over half the population's minds. And for good right. because and what we're seeing is what was called a conspiracy theory is now being shown that actually did happen on multiple fronts.
It's interesting that people get so emotional about just having a conversation about this. It's they feel like they take it so personally that just because they had a vaccine or something like that has to be the right thing to have done forever. I had both the vaccines, and I'm very open to having a conversation about all of those different things right now. Like I always wondered why, and of course I was doing that because we were around other family members, and you just do what you're told.
Right.
But I would have been much happier if there were more conversations around the power of mindfulness and nutrition and exercise, like all of those things to cover 80% of what it was, rather than say, hey, you're going to be healthy. I went to a CVS here. It's like a 15-year-old didn't ask me a single question, put this thing in my arm, nothing at all. And I was so sick that night, the sickest I'd been in probably 10 years as a result of having that. I'm not a doctor. I don't know anything about COVID or any of those other things. That was just my personal experience, and it just doesn't seem right. I would have felt much more comfortable going to an actual doctor who would ask me questions to find out, am I the type of person who needs this, to help me understand what it's actually going on?
It's tricky, right? Because again, there's a lot of the population that received the vaccine, and you want to think you did do the right thing, and you did, right? Because you did it. We can't go back. We just want to hope that doesn't cause complications down the road, but we have no idea, James. And when we look at the collusion between the government and the tech industry, and those papers are coming out, this isn't Dr. Greg making it up, there was clear profit motives behind the campaign. I would have to say I'm a radical optimist. I would like to think everybody was acting for the greatest, highest good. However, when you look at even the lab leak theory that got squashed from the top, it was the only plausible answer. It didn't come from some wet market in China. They're doing gain of function research. The DNA sequencing on this virus clearly came from a lab. That should be outlawed immediately. It continues today. That needs to end. Who in their right mind does that, right? For the benefit of humanity, we're now, we've got that. We had a massive pandemic from a lab. There's a lot of things you can do. I see a lot of folks with long COVID and also vaccine damage. We have a lot of therapies that we employ in our center. So if anybody is suffering long term, it's not made up in your head. It is actually happening, and there are professionals that can help you. The component, though, of, well, what do you do with that? Of course, informed consent. We need to watch this in the future. If you start, it is the propaganda and potentially manipulation of society that we need to have the warning signals go off in our brains of, if public discourse is shut off, or you find yourself othering half the population in North America, perhaps you should think in your brain, maybe I'm being manipulated, right? Because we aren't that different. Around the globe, there's one population of people living on our home, and we have been divided by country lines, by political lines, by, different alphabets, etc. And we are really one. And we need to wake up to that idea. There's more power together than separated. And when we start getting separated, or you start othering other people, that's where the trouble comes in. And I think that could be the warning signal, or what I like to call grist for the mill, to say, hey, something is happening here that is not me. Let me get back here and maybe open up some dialogues.
For sure. What's done is done. Let's focus on a collective future for the good of everyone. I know you treat a lot of people with long COVID and vaccine damage and things like that. Is there an easy way to determine if it was specifically related to a particular thing, or is that hard to do?
It's a little bit hard to do. There is blood work. So we have a methodology of detect, correct, and protect. And the detect component really is in testing. It is a test, don't guess scenario. There are some markers. D-dimer is one of those if it's an acute component, so that will fade through time, but we have measured a lot of D-dimer in the blood. There are levels of inflammation through your ESR, which is the SED rate of the erythrocyte sedimentation rate, C-reactive protein, which is an inflammatory marker. There are some sophisticated immunologic panels that we can run on folks as well. So it is different for everybody. It is a great mimicker as well. But there is some methodology behind that you can get tested.
Now, there's a lot of talk as well about this process of detoxification. There's people doing water fasting and other types of fasts. Is there any specific detoxification things that you recommend for people?
We live in a toxic soup. So it is, I
don't think anyone will disagree with that.
Yeah,
it's a
you
crazy
think
one.
about any filter in your life. What do you have to do with that filter, right? You have to change it.
Yeah.
You got to change the filter. So that is your liver in the human body. There's a whole cycle in there called the cytochrome P450. We can geek out on phase 1 and phase 2, and there's even a phase 3. But that aspect, like we're meant, it's like called the emunctories in naturopathic medicine. This is a tenet in naturopathic medicine, is detoxification. Your skin is the largest organ of your body. Dry skin brushing before a shower is very effective at stimulating the lymph, which is the garbage system of your body, to help detox the body. So dry skin brushing, you start at the periphery and come towards the heart. Actually, to the right side here is where the lymph dumps into your circulatory system. Deep breathing, by golly, you exhaling carbon dioxide is actually detoxification. So not just regular respiratory rate, but actually getting into some conscious breath work. Being well hydrated. We are a great portion of water to set up an electrical grid. It's been one of the top recommendations I have for patients over 24 years in practice is half your body weight in ounces. There's a great book. Batmanjali was in Iranian prison, and he documented all of the things that were cured with adequate hydration, from diabetes to cancer. Pretty remarkable what good filtered clean water, so not just tap water, not laden with metals, etc. Deep sleep and sleep. Like these are like non-sexy things, James, right? But there's nothing to sell with these either. But these are foundational things. We have a saying in our practice is you cannot supplement yourself out of a bag of potato chips. So it is like, depending on where your starting spot is. So it is, we start with those basic tenets, and then we want to get into organic food. The amount of glyphosate, that is also another crime against humanity. Professor Seralani out of France, I saw his first lecture in the US. Now, he was the one, his research and lab in Europe really was basically stopped glyphosate and Roundup products in Europe, in the EU. And he really took the hit for that. They debunked him, they decredited him. They put researchers from Monsanto onto the medical journals to then force him to retract his research. And it was sound research. So that's, when we get into this, it's almost like a radical act. Your health and your sovereignty as a being has to come from you, because it's not coming from the top down. I woke up, boy, when was that? I was sitting in my hometown of Johnstown, Pennsylvania at Eaton Park, the Eaton apostrophe Park. And it was my kids and my aunt. And I looked around, and this is my hometown, and it was just obesity everywhere. And it was an all-you-can-eat buffet, but the food was laden. It wasn't organic. It was kind of a toxic soup. I thought, gosh, we are treating people as products. Like, how much can we stuff in their gullet? How many drugs can we give them? Because they don't feel good eating that. And then how long can we keep them to a point and then, have them knock off? It's just like people are being treated as products at this point. And I thought, okay, we're putting the flag in the earth. No, we're taking back our control. We're bringing the sovereignty back, because good health is radical. You don't meet many people that have vibrant health anymore. And it is our natural state of being, and it is possible. So, I hope I gave some good actionable items in there.
Absolutely. Some of the biggest killers are things like heart disease and cancer, and I feel like there must have been so much money thrown at these things. Are we any closer to having a cure for some of this stuff, or is it really just we have to really impact the lifestyle level and then the education for the individual?
Boy, there are so many levels to that, right? So
and I know you're not an oncologist and stuff as well.
But the first component of longevity is don't die. So we promote that in our center. And we screen for cardiovascular, number 1 killer, cancer, number 2, and then we do neurodegeneration, number 3. And there are some simple things that you can do. We do VO2 max testing for cardiovascular disease. It's the number 1 predictor. You get on a bike, you get an EKG, and you get forced volume of oxygen. You can pick up cardiovascular disease 10 to 15 years before it ever becomes an issue. It's at a microscopic level. This should be in every cardiologist's office. Cholesterol is not so relevant. Total cholesterol is an antiquated and outmoded test. It came on the market in 1954. You can measure particle size, apolipoprotein B, lipoprotein little a. There are some specifics that actually are needle movers. Cancer screening. We have a cancer screening test that tests for 65 different cancers. It'll give you a yes or no. It's an early predictive agent, so you can really get into action. On neurodegeneration, we test plasmalogens. It's a blood test. It's the best predictor for all neurodegenerative states. This one, there's research showing when you have low plasmalogens in your blood, it's almost predictive for dementia and Alzheimer's. So if you have loved ones, maybe your grandparents or your parents, or you have concerns about that, that's one you really want to get on an annual basis. So there is an array of functional medicine testing, levels of toxicity, heavy metals, exposures to pesticides that you can get screened on to make sure there are no boogeymen, there are no monsters lurking in the closet. It's not okay to just ignore it and think, oh, everything's going to be fine. Or I've heard, that people are concerned, like, I don't want to know because there's no solution, right? I saw a 52-year-old with stage 2 Alzheimer's, really young. And the ages of neurodegeneration are getting younger and younger. Super depressed. He's basically, oh, sorry, you had this diagnosis, go get your affairs in order. He came in and we did our brain regeneration camp with him. His wife came in. He was referred by friends. They are all like, wow, he's back. He's out. They're traveling the world. They're doing the things that he was going to do, the bucket list items. And he got his life back. But he was super depressed when he came in. He's like, well, there's nothing. They got nothing for me, doc. Aricept, it adds 3 months of quality of life. That's nothing. In fact, I would suggest that it's not even worth it to get on the drug because it's very expensive and it doesn't really move the needle. It doesn't correct anything underlying causes. So we detect, we screen, we look at functional medicine arrays, we look at biochemistry, we look at your blood work, we look at an EEG. You have to get a proper assessment. It's not about what to take. It's actually, are you setting out in the right direction for you? I almost call it fractal medicine, right? You go in at the level that resonates for the person. Like the studies on mindset, it didn't matter which path somebody took. They had to believe in it. So I just want people to get curious, like, hey, there's research on meditation now that says it turns on SERPINA5 gene, which is anti-inflammatory, anti-cancer. It's a youthful gene that gets turned on when you get quiet. It's amazing. There's no money to be made there. Nobody's telling the doctors in the offices, like, here, prescribe this. So you're not going to get that in your traditional doctor's office unless they're into meditation.
How do you figure out what research you want to apply clinically versus what you just want to just leave?
I call myself a clinician's clinician. I want to use things that move the needle in the real world. So that's through experience. There's a lot of trial and error. And how do we implement it? Like, is it doable? Is it sustainable? Will it get long-lasting results? So we are now in development. Like I'm going down to San Diego to meet some researchers down there that have an amazing mitochondria test. We hear a lot about the mitochondria. he kind of nonchalantly talked about it, and where the clinicians on the call were like, what, you have that? Like, we now know we can go to the front of the line for that individual precision medicine. We can put these substances on the card in your lab, and it'll tell us if it's going to work for this person. It's like, that's revolutionary, because before it was trial and error. You go on the paths that are paved, and then you get on the dirt trails, then you get on the game trails, and then sometimes you're bushwhacking with the individual. So it is, one, life experience, two, knowledge and clinical experience, and three, being well connected into the change maker. So I'm talking to the scientists that are producing the research on longevity, and then we're pulling that right in. People don't have 20 to 30 years to wait for that research to come into the centers or their clinics in primary care.
I can imagine if someone comes to you with what is essentially a death sentence, it's like, use me as a test doll. Do basically what I would, If you said, hey, you got 3 months to live and I got kids, I'm like, cool. Do whatever you think is in my best
First
interest.
tenet, do no harm, right? Yeah. That's a first tenet in medicine across the board. Why not try? I had a patient, I had a 29-year-old with Lou Gehrig's disease, right? That was, remember the ice bucket challenge a couple of years back? It's a cruel, cruel condition, right? The mind stays, but the body disintegrates around it. This family was going to go to China for some stem cell therapeutics, and they found me. And I think we have one of the most profound brain regeneration programs on the planet right now, and we're publishing the outcomes of some research with that. But the family, so this girl did pass after about 2 years of care. The medical doctor in the community called my medical board on me, said she had issues with me trying this. And I talked to this doc and I said, how dare you value this girl's life so little? The family was overjoyous. You couldn't tell when you were talking to her on the phone, you couldn't tell that she had ALS. So she maintained her voice and that connection with her family for 2 extra years. And while we didn't get complete cure, you would think, well, that's a failure. No, that's not a failure. She had 2 more years with her family. And they are so grateful for those years and those experiences, and to be able to, communicate and look in her eyes and hug her and all of those things that, you can take for granted if you want. But I would say we need to celebrate those and really energize them, because we don't know how long we're on the planet. So it is leaving the door open for those possibilities, making sure you surround yourself with others that have an expansive, bigger future than their past, because that is how we get there.
So good. Last question now before the rocket round. On your best day, what's an affirmation that you would write on a flashcard that you could show yourself on your worst day?
Just trust. It is all happening for you.
I think that's a great one. All right, let's now move to the Win the Day Rocket Round. 10 questions for some quick answers. You up for this one?
I'm ready.
Number 1, what quote inspires you the most?
Be here now.
Number 2, morning coffee or evening wine?
Coffee, definitely.
Do you get good coffee in Park City?
Oh, you know what? I actually import my coffee from Eugene, Oregon. It was Soraya's favorite coffee, Cafe Mom. It's also mold free. So I'm kind of a snob. And actually even living in Portland, Oregon, which is a coffee-centric town, that was my blend.
Hey, good. You've got a big audience of Australians. We're all coffee snobs in Australia.
Oh, yeah, there you go. There you go.
It's very funny. Number 3, what's one bit of advice you would give your 18-year-old self?
Take it easy. Follow your heart.
Number 4, what book do you gift the most, or that contributed most to the mindset you have today?
There's going to be a theme here, James. It is Be Here Now. Ram Dass, I found him as a teenager, and Neem Karoli Baba was his guru. And in the back of that book is like essential reading of the soul. And so I read every book in the back of that book in high school. And I have no idea how I was so fortunate to find that early, but it really opened me up to the energetics of what we talked to today.
Love it. Number 5, is there a vulnerability you once hid within that became your superpower?
It was the heart portal. It is our portal to our multi-dimensional beingness. And, being a man in America, you're not grown up to be in your heart. And so I kind of kept that protected or closed. And now it's like, no, you got to open that thing up because that is the way.
Helps feed your curiosity too, which I love, like you mentioned earlier. Number 6, what's one thing you've learned about failure?
You don't fail until you give up. And it is all happening for you. It's almost as if, the tragedy that I shared of my life story of my life, my wife, Soraya, passing, it could have been an easy way to play it small. So take everything as the curriculum of this incarnation.
If you could sit on a park bench and have a conversation with someone alive or dead, who would it be?
Leonardo da Vinci.
Oh, awesome.
Yes. I am so a Renaissance fan, and that eclecticism of, he was so wide reaching and brilliant.
Talk about ahead of your time as well.
Yeah. Yeah, right.
Number 8, what tool or resource best helps you run your life or your business?
It's that meditation. And it's not just sitting like a monk in Sichuan province. It could be mindfulness. Thich Nhat Hanh wrote a great book, is Peace is Every Step. So it's just mindfulness and being this connection to your higher self and the heart. That is critical.
Number 9, share one thing on your bucket list.
Going to Iceland in winter to see the Northern Lights. So maybe camping out in one of those clear igloos.
Hey, that'd be fun. Take me with you. Yeah, that's awesome. And final question, number 10, what's one thing you do to win the day?
To win the day, it's that starting the day in stillness, taking the moment to connect to heart and just being present and grateful for it.
So good. Well, there are a bunch of ways to connect with Dr. Eckel, and we'll link to all of these in the show notes. You can follow him on Instagram at E4L Centers. Visit his website, energy4lifecenters.com, and download your free health voice scan by clicking the link in the show notes. Do you want to quickly give us a bit of an overview of what that is?
Yeah, thank you for asking. I forgot to mention it. We are a bioenergetic flagship, so we're really bringing bioenergetics into clinical encounters. And this is a really fascinating, you do a voice scan, you just count to 10. And what it does is it measures your biofield, so the energy surrounding the body. So we're bringing quantum mechanics into clinical encounters, meaning, these receptors, it's signals traveling. Like we understand it with our phones really well. It's like these invisible things come in here and it's got all of those apps. Well, the same thing is happening with your body, and nobody is really talking about it except for us. We're bringing it to you real time. So please take us up on it. You'll get an hour discussion of it as well with one of my coaches or providers. And it is super fascinating, James. So I would say get curious about it, give it a go, and see what comes out. You'll get a full 32-page report from it as well.
Love it. Great gift. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining me on another episode of the Win the Day podcast. We want to hear your thoughts on what we covered today, so drop a comment on the YouTube version of this episode with your favorite takeaway, any questions you have, or what actions you'll be taking as a result of what was shared in this episode. And if you found value in the Win the Day podcast, leave a 5-star rating on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. You'll find a link to both of those in the show notes. It'll only take you a few seconds, and more ratings really helps other people discover the show so they can get the mindset upgrade they need, and we can bring more winners into the Win the Day movement. That's all for this episode. Get out there and win the day. Until next time, onwards and upwards, always.